Hey everyone, this is the homework video for October 16th, the week we're studying percents, fractions, and decimals, and how to fluently move between all of those things. So let's go ahead and get started. It says, please express each percentage as a fraction. So let's do that, right? So we start off with 2%, and the thing to remember is that percent means out of 100. Right, I always think of this as being the fraction bar and these zeros being the zeros of the 100. So 2% is 2 hundredths. Now we could write that as 0.02 or 2 hundredths, but they ask us to write it as a fraction and put it in simplest terms. That means that we need to simplify by dividing by a common factor. Let me get a better color here. So a common factor of the numerator and the denominator. That means what can we divide the two numbers by? So 2 can be divided by 2 and 100 can be divided by 2. And that should give us a simpler fraction. 2 divided by 2, of course, is 1. And 100 divided by 2 is 50. So 1/50th equals this decimal, 2 hundredths. It also equals this percent, 2%. 1/50th is our solution here. And that's true for any of them on this page. Some are easier to simplify than others. For example, 60 hundredths. Just make sure you can see that. You know, it's obvious what the common factor is there. But for something like maybe 24 hundredths, it might take us a couple steps. So let's try this one. They're both even again, so let's divide by 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 100 divided by 2 is 50. You might notice that both of these are even, so we can divide again. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And now 6 can only be divided by 2 and 3. 25 can only be divided by 5. That means there's no other common factor, and that is the simplest form. We could say 6 out of 25 is equal to 24%. And we can say that by just doubling back. Let's see. Can I turn 25 into 100? Sure. I'd multiply by 4. What's 6 times 4? 24 hundredths is 24%. So there we go. Back and forth, fluency. All right, what happens when you're given a decimal and we're asked to write the decimal as a percentage? It's even easier, right? This says 3/10, right? So you probably know that with a decimal number, that's 3/10, and if we look in the hundreds place, there's nothing there. And luckily we have a digit that represents nothing. It's 30, so that would be 30%. What does that look like as a fraction? Let's just hang in here and check this out. 3/10, if I change the denominator to 100th, 10 times 10 is 100, what would I get on top? Well, 3 times 10 is 30. As a decimal, it just meant that we add that extra place value and show 0 there. Instead of doing this multiplying by 10 business that we did here, we're just showing the next place value. All right? Some of these are already in hundredths. 67 hundredths you should recognize as 67%. But what about something like this? What the heck is that? Well, that's the tenths place, that's the hundredths place, and that's the thousandths place. So let me zoom in here to see this a little more carefully. So that is 4 thousandths, and we need it to be 100. So that means that we need to divide by 10. Okay? 4 divided by 10 is 0.4. Right? You know, when you divide something by 10, it gets smaller by one place value. It's like the decimal went from here, behind the ones place, to right there in front. So what the heck is that? Well, it's 0.4%. It's 0.4 over 100. Another way to think about this is you can just move the decimal over 2 places, right? And that gives us 0.4%. Up here, we saw if we move the decimal 2 places, we would have 67%. Some people say, well, moving the decimal 2 places, that's just multiplying by 100. That's true. That's true. If you multiply by 100, you can turn the decimal into a percent. I'd prefer that you think about it the hundredths place and the thousandths place, though. It makes you more fluent, makes you understand what's going on. All right, getting into the next, this is towards the end of the week. We're going to write fractions as percents, right? 48 hundredths, done. 6/10, hopefully you know you can turn that into 100. Oops, sorry. By multiplying by 10. And 6 times 10 is 60. We need to get that denominator of 100 to get a percent. 60%. In the video you've seen, if you're having trouble, you've probably watched the other video I've created. But some fractions are harder than others. Right? Can I turn 5 into 100? What would I multiply 5 by to make 100? This, you might think 75 can't be turned into 100. And you're right, in a way, it can't be directly, but what if I divided it by 3? I would get 25. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Do you think you can turn 5/25ths into 100? I'm sure that you could turn this into 100. Something crazy like this, 8ths. Well, you might think I could divide it by 2 to get a 4. 4 can be turned into 100, right? But 5 can't be divided by 2. Well, easily. I mean, it can, but you'd be left with a decimal. What can we do? What can we do? Well, you can roll with the decimal. Sure, it's 2.5. Or maybe there's another solution. Maybe you could take the y value and divide it by the x value. And that will give you your decimal solution. Also, that will turn your fraction into a decimal, which will easily be written as a percent. Okay, so here are just a couple solutions. Boom. You can use the decimal up there. You can find the decimal solution here. And as we get to the end, I want you to think of these as multiplication problems, right? When we're taking a part of something, it is a multiplication problem. So this is going to be written as a decimal. 40% of 70, right? Now, 25% of 80. That's all there is to it. You just need to be careful that you're writing the decimal correctly. 40% of, well, I'd put the one with more digits on top, of 200. So these are simply multiplication problems. Just be aware, 5% is 5/100ths. Okay, that should do it for us today.